This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
It was definitely still that shock. Like, I remember, and actually I left there, I started crying in the car. And that was because I felt like I'm the cheater and I cheated on my father, my dad, right? Because he doesn't know about any of this, right? And I didn't like that. I'm not the type of person that likes to keep anything. I don't have any secrets in my life. Even the hardships I share, on whatever social media, like I'm a very open person. So the fact that he didn't know right off the bat really, really bothered me. And I made that clear to my mom. Like, I was like, how could you do this to him? Because I already felt like she hurt him so much. And now I'm just like her, keeping it from him.
Imagine spitting into a tube, sending off your DNA, and unknowingly turning your life upside down. For me and thousands of others, this is our reality. I'm your host, Alexis Auerselt. In July of 2021, I discovered that I am an NPE, someone who has experienced a non-paternal event. In other words, my biological father isn't who I thought he was. This podcast shares the journeys of people who were shocked by a DNA discovery, mostly through modern DNA testing. We're telling the stories of NPEs, adoptees, and donor-conceived people and their families. This is DNA Surprises. Welcome to Season 4 of DNA Surprises. In our first episode of the season, Natalie shares her NPE story. When Natalie experienced her surprise, she had no idea that she was uncovering her mother's decades-long secret about not only Natalie, but her brother as well. So many of us are desperate for answers when we first uncover a DNA surprise. Natalie's story perfectly captures how we often learn more and more truths as time passes. Thank you for sharing your story, Natalie.
Okay, Natalie, I'm 37 and I live in Vancouver, Canada. My life kind of went from very, very normal to so crazy in such a short time. So I was raised in a, very average home, average income parents. Dad's a peace officer, mom's a banker, a good set of friends, got decent grades, didn't get in much trouble. For it to turn the other way was quite surprising. I didn't think anything was different in terms of my parents or relationships. I didn't feel like the black sheep, I wouldn't say. I did have a younger brother who is 5.5 years younger than me. I have seen the ads for 23andMe and Ancestry for a long time. I always thought, that'd be kind of neat. Like, I think I know I was pretty sure I knew where my grandparents are all from. My mom was born in Europe. I knew what island she was from. So that wasn't going to be a surprise, but it was more just the combination of what my dad was that kind of made me curious, not really even thinking about the DNA matches at that point. So I think it was on sale and like, okay, I'm going to get the Ancestry, kind of finally got around to doing it. You'd get the notification that, it's in progress. I took a screenshot, sent it to, my parents and my husband have like a WhatsApp group, and, sent it to them going, okay, any secrets you want to let me know? Like, is my father on a yacht somewhere? Totally joking.
Wow.
Yeah, totally like joking. My mom writes, oh yeah, haha, your dad's just only has a fishing boat. Sorry, referring to when I say dad, birth certificate, father. feel really bad about all that now, considering my dad was in that group. And he didn't say anything. So results come back and it was very different. Whereas the Scottish, there's a little bit of the English, but didn't see that Scottish I expected. And there was German, and it didn't really make sense for 50% of it. The other 50%, they nailed it right down to the small little tiny island my mom was born on. So it didn't make sense at all. I still didn't think to look at those DNA matches. I was kind of just thinking it was that breakdown that I was going to get. So I screenshotted that, sent it to the same group. My parents in there going, what's going on? Was he a German spy? Like, is there something totally still not thinking, the worst, still. And my mom's just going, oh, those are probably wrong. I said, well, then how did they get literally where you were born dead on? And the other, I again, still didn't think it was me that was going to be estranged or not biological. Then I started, and this is the first day I got the results back. Then I start going, oh, maybe my grandmother, maybe she adopted my dad and he doesn't know. I just kind of went to that side of the family, where could that have happened? Still not even thinking at all it was me. Getting goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah, so you kind of put the pieces together that there was an NPE, but it wasn't going to be you. It was somebody else.
Exactly. And I'm the type of person that I have to know everything. I'm just very curious, always been that way. I want to know all the details. I'm very type A personality. I'm very organized. I did always enjoy the genealogy, the family trees and whatnot. I've done a lot of those on Ancestry. But yeah, so it was strange. And so I remember, I think it was the next day, I think my mom, again, like I said, just kind of tried to brush it off. Now looking back, she was trying to shut me up and just, kind of get me to move past it. But I think deep down she knows me and she knows I wouldn't stop. And then the next day, she was babysitting my kids. I was upstairs in my office working and I came down and I said, I think I know what happened. I think it might have been my grandma, blah, 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 and she went white. Because this is the first time I've seen her in person talking about it. And I, again, still didn't think that it was me. And I said, you know something. What do you know? Still thinking she knows something, but so naive. And she said, it was me. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she starts bawling her eyes out, saying it was me that did it. Your dad isn't your biological father. I thought he was, and so I'm just literally in shock. You'd think I would be mad, but she was crying and I was consoling her saying, thank you for telling me. But realistically, that wasn't at all my attitude the day after and any other day since. So It's funny how I consoled her, but I don't think it took a long time for me to actually believe that this was the case.
And how long ago was this?
This was a year and a half ago. And it was already a tough time because of COVID and my job, there was no business. We were out of work. I'm self-employed. So it was tough anyways, especially because when you have, nothing to distract you from it, it's you're thinking about it all day, every day. There's not, you're already worried about, finances and stuff adding up, and then this just gets thrown on it. So I would say in major shock for a couple of weeks. I had no appetite. I think I lost almost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. It was because I just wasn't hungry and didn't really, know how to process it because it was just couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. And then, so the day that she said that, we ended up my husband was working from home in the basement. I go down, tell him I'm just I don't know. I still don't get it. He's like, okay, well, I'll take the kids for a walk. You talk to your mother. So we sat down and talked. I was surprisingly calm again, still not really realizing what's going on here I am, but I'm just totally shocked. And she said that, so her and my dad were married for 5 years. I knew that. And I always thought, she always just said, oh, I just wasn't getting pregnant, and eventually I did. So I knew that. I knew they took them a long time to get pregnant. She, I guess, took matters into her own hands and cheated on my father with her ex. Apparently, this not a full-on affair for this reason. And basically said that she heard an old wives' tale that if you do that, you'll get pregnant by your husband. I'm like, really? I don't think that's the way it would work. Like, anyways,
yeah,
I didn't believe that. I just thought that's a very terrible excuse. Then I said, well, does dad know? She says no. And she said that she truly believed right off the bat that I was his, which seems so insane considering you try, for 5 years. I don't know why. She said it wasn't like trying like today, we was just seeing what was going to happen, not in a hurry, and then, so I was like, immediately like felt terrible for him. And as I'm sitting there, I go, well, what about my brother? And again, she kind of hesitated and said, I did the same thing 5 years later. And I was like,
oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And he has no idea. I know that. So, I mean, I don't have a really great relationship with him. We've never been that close. But I did look at the DNA matches before she told me this. Again, this was only probably within a matter of a day. I was already trying to piece it together, obviously, and did see someone who had a family tree. It was like, I think it was like a second cousin's family tree. So I was able to see that. And even just said, like, how are we connected? Like, kind of looking at each other's family trees, right? Before I knew the full story, trying to figure out just where they are on my dad's side or what. And she shared her family tree. So I was even able to see names of people that are alive. Usually you just see the ones that are deceased, but she shared it with me. We still couldn't make the connection, but I did see all the names. And so now when my mom's telling me this, I'm like, what's his name? So she tells me his name and I'm like, then I look and sure enough, he's on there. Right. So it all started adding up. Like, because of course at that point, you don't know, you literally have this person you trusted for 6 years and don't know at that point what is the truth and what isn't. Right. So even as she's telling me this information, I'm questioning it. Right. So, but it checked out. That person was on there. And then, of course, I Googled the name. I find an obituary from 2016. It didn't say, it said that he struggled with drug use most of his adult life. And it did mention his son's name. So immediately I think, okay, I have a half brother. So I start like digging, Facebook and doing all my little, investigation. I find a biological aunt. She's in her 70s. Yeah, or I think she's around 70 now, but she had a pretty open Facebook profile. So I'm kind of piecing things together. We even had a mutual friend, which is crazy. But I could kind of piece together that the son of my half-brother, who I thought was my half-brother, was raised by her, is what it seemed like. Like the way he, she referred to him as, I think, her son. I noticed that there was seemed like she was the mother figure to him. And I think that he even called her that in one of the posts or something. So, and I assume that because, it said there was drug use involved, maybe she adopted him, or that was kind of my assumption. Didn't know at that point.
How did you feel when you found an obituary and learned this about your biological father?
I think because it was so early on and I was still in shock, I didn't really, I can't say I was like, oh, like, darn, I can't meet him. I wanted to meet him at that point, right? Like I felt, but at the same time, hearing that he had a tough life, you're just like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Like you wish you could have helped. You had no idea, but I also didn't know, did he even know about me? Did he even know her, what she was trying to do? I didn't know. According to my mom, she didn't know he had a drug problem. I don't think maybe at that time it was that bad. Definitely progressed according to the aunts and stuff. So I've gotten more information later on. And I don't know, I was kind of because when I saw that half brother, I was like, well, now I definitely have to contact them because that was, something that I guess because I can't meet him, it's that, connection. And again, this is still early on. So I usually jump into things pretty fast, but I was a little nervous that it was going to be too soon just for my mental health. Right. So I think I waited, I think it was about 3 weeks. Just doing, my online research, trying to figure it out. I found out that the family friends, like her young daughter was friends with, or maybe it was her boyfriend's friends with the half brother. Like I kind of knew everything before I connected with them, or thought I did. And I did eventually, because I wasn't really, I could have looked her up in the phone book and just called, but that just seemed way too nerve-wracking. So I ended up going back on the ancestry messages with that lady who would have been, I think it was her husband that I had the DNA connection with. He was the top one out of all the connections. And I think he would have been my biological father's first cousin, I believe. So I asked her, I didn't tell her that I discovered this because I hadn't told anybody at this point. I just said, oh, this name of this lady sounds familiar. Any chance you have her email address? Because I didn't want to do Facebook either, because I know a lot of times if you're not friends, I don't receive it. And then I'd be all like, maybe she saw it and doesn't want to message me back. So I'm glad I didn't go that route for that reason. But she was a little bit like, oh, well, can you tell me about yourself? And I'll let her know. I kind of wanted to know. She even Googled me. She's like, oh, I saw your work website. I'm just like, oh my goodness. So she's like, you look great. I'm like, okay, well, can I just have that email address?
Yeah.
So I guess she talked to her and the biological aunt, not just saying, I don't know how she explained it, but she was fine with giving out her email address. So I sent her an email saying, this probably sounds pretty wild, but this is what I discovered. And I figured, because I was kind of worried she wouldn't believe me, but at the same time, it's not like I'm trying to get his money. It's not like I don't have that DNA match to her cousin, that the lady did contact her. So there was obviously proof there. And I asked about the half brother. So I got a reply pretty quick, I think the same day. So the first thing she was like, oh, wow, this is amazing, but I didn't, and I think she might have said at that point there was a rumor, or maybe in one of the emails, because we had a few email exchanges back and forth, but that first one, she did say, oh, about your half brother. He actually did a 23andMe after his dad died and got matched with a father.
Oh my!
And I was just like, no way! Here, our situations are somewhat similar. I've never met anybody that I know of that's gone through this. And then suddenly it's just insane. It's just insane. So she still gave his email address, said, oh, he'd love to chat with you kind of thing. It seemed really, really nice. He's about 10 years younger than me. So, so it was all pretty insane. And then, so a couple email exchanges, and then we eventually did talk on the phone, and she was just the sweetest lady. Luckily, the rest of the family didn't have any drug issues or mental health issues I could see, but she was very sweet, very nurturing, kind of, especially because I didn't have my mother to go, talk to about. She was always willing, checking in with me, texting me, and really, really sweet right off the bat. Very similar personality to mine too. So we could just talk on the phone for hours. So it was all pretty crazy. And apparently the half brother was quite upset, even though he wasn't close with my biological father. She was the mother that raised him, the aunt, right? So even though that he thought that was his biological aunt. So I think just that, not having that connection was hard for him. It sounded like. I haven't had much of a conversation with him about it because I don't want to bring up, anything that's painful, because I know she said he didn't reach out, he didn't, I think he might have sent an email, there was just basically one correspondence with that match and didn't meet him or anything, just wasn't wanting to do that. And he did keep his story private, even from family members. So it was kind of her telling me not to say anything, in terms of if I reach out to the other aunt and cousins and stuff, and me saying, please don't share mine either, because there is a mutual friend. You probably already noticed on Facebook, because I think at that point we were probably Facebook friends, and basically just said, we'll keep things private and not, if we're going to tell a friend, not mention any names and whatnot. So, so that was how it panned out. But at the same time, she, talks about his death, and it turns out that he was actually murdered. So that came as a total shock, because I just assumed an overdose, or, because he wasn't very old. So I think he would have been in his 50s, probably mid 50s at the time. So that was tough. And it's, it's kind of like I didn't want to ask questions, but if I don't, I'm going to just have these thoughts like what happened actually. And she basically said that he inherited some money because their mother passed away and everyone got inheritance, and he wasn't quiet about it. And, I don't know if he owed somebody money but apparently they didn't end up getting it. So maybe they were just trying to get his PIN number or something. And that was the consequence of not.
Wow.
Yeah. So
this episode is brought to you by Honda. Introducing the all-new, all-terrain Honda Passport Trail Sport, the most off-road capable Honda Passport Honda has ever dreamt up. The Passport features increased ground clearance, roof rails on all trims, and available specially developed all-terrain tires. And you'll stay comfortable with tri-zone climate control and available features like heated and ventilated front seats and a panoramic moonroof. Learn more at honda.com/passport.
Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
It wasn't an overdose as you
no, and I don't even know if it had to do with the drugs. I'm sure it was related to the people, he surrounded himself with. He was a functioning drug addict, it sounds like, to a point. Like he had a high-paying job where there is a lot of drug use, but basically never lost his job, could go back to work and work when he wanted to, right? So I'm sure he had some tough times and some, better times. They tried to get him help, but I think he was very secretive about it. I think even though they knew, I don't think he still came to some family things. Doesn't sound like he was that close with the child that she ended up raising, but she didn't end up adopting him either until he was an adult, like after the father passed away. But they've always been so close, and she was basically a single mother to him.
So did you learn a lot about your bio father from your aunt, like in terms of just his interests and personality and things like that?
Yeah, a little bit. I actually ended up meeting them again, probably quicker than I should have. It was one of those things where I should have been way more excited, but I was so nervous, but also it just didn't seem real yet, right? Like they were emotional. I get there, she's bawling her eyes out, right? Like kind of like I'm the piece of him that they don't have anymore, right?
So, because of the other NPE.
Exactly. And well, not even that, but because he's passed away, right? So
yeah,
it was pretty, and they were so sweet. So I met the two biological aunts, couple cousins, and the half brother. I still call him my half brother, but they had a cake that said "Welcome to the family." Like they were just so sweet. So I really, that was kind of the silver lining for sure. Even though I can't meet my biological father, that seemed a lot easier, like less nerve-wracking. Even though I was nervous, it seemed like it was less nerve-wracking, not as much pressure. And I remember my mom being worried, knowing that I was going to meet them. She was worried they would not care, kind of I'd feel like they didn't care, and that because she knows that would have upset me. So, but they were great. It was, and I think at that point too, I was really starting to get into the depression. Like I was having nightmares about his death, and it was causing me to not sleep much at all because I would just be dull. So it was kind of that anxiety and depression started really creeping in. I found out in December, so I was able to use like all my, coverage. We have like $500 a year for coverage for counseling through my husband's employer. So it was good timing because I used that $500 literally in 3 weeks. So I think I had like 4 sessions. Like I probably could have used more. But then of course, January, it starts over. So I still kept seeing that counselor. So I'm really glad I started right away. And I also made sure my doctor knew, because I just didn't feel right. Like it was such a roller coaster of emotions. One day might feel a little better, but the next day I'm like down, it just was so all over the place. One day I'd want to try to fix a relationship with my mom. The next day I was so angry. I could never talk to her again. Right. It was weird. So, and then it started like, I started thinking, well, like, because she really, you can tell, was like, oh, you're going to ruin our marriage if you tell him, or you're going to, like they're still married 40 years. So it was kind of that guilt was like, I don't want that on my conscience, but he still, if I'm saying I deserve to know a long time ago, shouldn't he? That was kind of my thought process. At the same time, you don't know if there's different types of people. Some people might not want to know. Right? I'm not like that. So it's really hard to understand or even, just guess which he would prefer. Right? So he is more of a quite like definitely different personality than me. Yeah. So it was definitely a struggle. And I was just basically trying to get her to tell him. And I tried, and she'd say she was going to and never tell him. And so it wasn't until about a year after I discovered it that I said, because he started really sensing like he knew something was wrong between us, basically that whole year. And he started basically acting like I was just causing these fights and being hard on me about it. And all I'm thinking is like, if you only knew, you would be on her side, even though you don't know what, you're just making assumptions as to what you probably think we're arguing about, or I don't know if she's telling him something. So that's when it got to the point that I'm like, this isn't fair that he's blaming me for our relationship issues between me and my mom. So that's when I told her, if you don't tell him, I'm going to tell him he's coming over in 2 hours. And I had already arranged that with him. That was crazy in itself. And this is now a year after I first found out. And it turns out he did play hockey with the guy, so he would know his name. Like in high school, because they're all from high school. This was my mom's first boyfriend. Okay. So, and her and my dad ended up being high school sweethearts. I think that he went to a different high school, but they grew up in the same area and whatnot. So
she tells him before he comes over to your house?
Yeah, and I don't even know how. It seemed like he didn't know a lot. I don't know if she just like left and sent him a text. I don't really, I didn't ask. But when he walked in, I didn't think she told him because it was so normal. And so I was like, okay, she didn't. And then I'm kind of like, so do you know why you're here? Because I had said I have something to tell you when I arranged it. And he goes, oh yeah, mom said that, like he kind of just had like he didn't have a lot of details, but he didn't seem bothered. I was like, really, I don't know. I was just like thinking maybe she didn't tell him the truth. I don't know. But then he did know, like he did. So I thought maybe he suspected this. Just the way but he says, no, I didn't. And he had no reason to lie. And, like, because realistically, he's, as hurt as I am, right? If they weren't in, if he didn't know early on, either way, he got cheated on and then not told, right? My mom still to this day is like, I was convinced. I think she really, really worked hard at convincing herself I was his, right? Obviously, there's a possibility. It could be either, sure. But... And I look a lot like her. I don't look like my dad or even biological father that much. Right. So it's, so I get why she did that. But at the same time, she mentioned something about how every time the phone rang when you were little, I would be like, oh my God, worried that he would get involved or try.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
When I first talked to my mom on that day, she told me when we sat down and talked, I did ask because I knew I'd already, I guess, looked up the obituary when I was with her and saw some aunts and, siblings listed. And I said to her, had you ever met his siblings? Because obviously, him, he was your first boyfriend. And she does swear it wasn't an affair. It was like a 2-time thing. But I said, "Had you met his siblings?" And she said, "No, I haven't met them." She said, "But we did go to your family friend. It's a family friend I'm still friends with to this day, and we're the same age. So we did go to his first communion at a Catholic church, and I saw your biological father's brother." And I was like, "Oh, how did you know it was him?" She goes, "Well, he looked just like him, but also I saw his twin daughters' names in the program because they were having their first communion. So we were just guests to watch it. But she obviously saw the same last name and put the pieces together." And I thought, oh, weird. And then, so I was literally watching my cousins get, their confirmation at 7 years old. We all would have been 7 years old because they're the same year as well. So that was that. I didn't really think anything of that. But when I first emailed that biological aunt, she said in her, I think, initial email, the first or second email, she said, "Did you by chance have your first communion at a church?" And she told me the city of the church, and it matched up to what my mom was talking about. And I'm like, whoa, this is strange. Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Because she didn't know my mom had said that. Like, I didn't mention it. And I didn't want to go into the story. I just said, "Why you ask?" And she said, "Oh, because we were at my niece's first communion, and there was a lady there that, like, your biological father was there too. The whole family was there to watch. And he pointed at a lady and said, 'Oh, I've been with her. I wonder if that little girl's my daughter.'"
Wow.
She could even remember like what I was wearing. And she said, "I didn't think anything of it really, just because of his lifestyle and his mental health issues." Mm-hmm. So, but she did say that was there was a rumor sort of thing. And probably from that, or maybe he mentioned it to someone else. But I'm like, he saw me. That's when I realized he actually did see me once.
And he did wonder.
Yeah.
Even if it was briefly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So your dad, your birth certificate father, dad, took it all in stride, it seems like. How are your parents doing now?
Well, I wondered how it would go because I thought that I was going to this is ending their marriage. And I say I was going to end their marriage because that's what I was told that I was going to be doing if I told him. But again, I thought, I'm not. This was your decision to do. This was your decision to not tell us or not. I said, if you really wanted to know, you could have taken a piece of our hair off the pillowcase and done a test without us knowing. If you really, if you really cared to find out for my sake, right?
Yeah.
But no, she wanted to just believe it and leave it at that. So he definitely is the type that bottles things up, for sure. He doesn't talk about his feelings. He would never, ever in his life go see a counselor because he wouldn't even think that would help or he has any reason to. So I wondered I didn't think they would stay married, to be honest, because I know that's a pretty big deal. That's not just cheating on someone, that's doing it with the intent of having children. And I did mention to my dad when I did see him that day, like, I didn't know if she had mentioned my brother. And I didn't want to bring it up because, like I said, I don't really have a relationship with my brother. I didn't really feel like it was my place and I didn't want to make it worse either. But I did say something, like I somehow tried to dig about, like, does he know? So I did say something just like, "Oh, I wonder if he knows about this." And he said, "Oh yeah, your mom told me that it happened again." Like, so she did tell him that.
Does your brother know?
He just found out probably 4 or 5 months ago. He found out about 3 months after my dad found out. So yeah, it was all, and I did say and I wondered, because I'm like, if I had my brother's address, I would have like anonymously left ancestry on his doorstep. I didn't think he'd ever be interested in doing it though. Like, I didn't think if he even got it as a gift, he would do it. And I was kind of like thinking that my dad wouldn't want him to know. Like, it sounded like they wouldn't tell him, which is kind of bad because now it's two parents lying about it instead of one. And now it's, although I couldn't also really like confirm that my brother was, because there was no DNA test. Like, we know she did that, but I didn't want to be the one to tell him and him do the DNA test, it not pan out, and then he gets mad at me, or I also was scared to tell him because I thought he'd tell everyone about me, you know, like share my story when I didn't want it shared at that time. And I did say when my dad was there that day, he did seem really concerned about who knew. And I had only told my mom's cousin, who's my godmother, and some friends. I didn't mention them, but I just said the only one who knows him was her. And my mom ended up telling her, not because she wanted to, but because I said to her that my counselor asked if I had another mother figure to talk to. And I said, the only one I can think of that I'd want to talk to is my godmother. And I said to the counselor, I said, but I can't tell her, like my mom would be so mad. It would just cause more issues. And she said, why do you think you need permission from your mom to tell your story? And I was like, that's so true. But I told my mom this, and she ended up telling her for me. And that was, she was in shock too. So she would come over every now and then and we just, talk about it. She was crying that first time, because it was like basically my mom was like a sister to her. And because my mom and dad were high school sweethearts, she was their flower girl in their wedding. She remembers, them being together most of her life. So yeah, it was a shock to her as well. But I know I could trust her. So to not, share it and still do. And I told some friends, and I tried to make it where the ones I told weren't going to be the ones in the same room as my dad, because my dad at the time didn't know. And I didn't want anyone uncomfortable because they knew something so personal that he doesn't. I told a couple of friends, in different provinces, the ones I could trust. Like I have some really great friends. So
to this day, are you keeping a secret for your dad? Or do you feel like you can talk about it openly?
No, it's a part of it's for him. I guess for me, I'm normally open. I'd like to be able to share, but then I also wonder, do I want to be the gossip, be gossiped about in the families, right? My dad's side, my mom's side, I know it will happen. It's not like everyone's close to me and will, my mom doesn't talk to certain people and some siblings in her family. So they'd, be talking about it. I didn't like thinking that I'd be the topic of their, kind of I'd like to share with maybe more people in my life, but I don't know that I'd be ready to do that. I also had my mom's mental health to consider because she always made it oh my God, if anybody knew, I'd have to literally leave the country. But it could be worse. I don't know if she'd be suicide. I was really worried about that because she really cares about what people think of her. And that would be very embarrassing for sure. I couldn't imagine how embarrassing that would be. But when I mentioned it to with my dad asking who knew, he seemed very concerned about that. And I said, I can keep it to myself. And he's like, okay, yeah, good. You don't need your grandmother knowing this, and his mom and whatnot. And that's true too. I guess I would always wonder if I told everyone, are they treating me differently? Or that, I might be in my head where even though they're not, I think it seems like it, right? So it can go different ways. So I don't really know how it would be taken and how I'd feel after the fact. So I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but my dad, my birth certificate father, really didn't want people to know. And it is embarrassing for him as well. So there's definitely a lot of shame on my mom's end, but on his end, with him choosing to stay with her, if he does continue to stay with her. So their relationship hasn't really seemed like it's changed, but I also haven't seen a ton of them, because I really still distance myself from my mom. I mean, he stopped blaming me for us fighting, but...
Have you talked to your brother at all? I know you said you aren't close, but have you talked to him about this?
He texted me saying he did a test and my mom told him everything. Can I call you? And I said, sure. Normally I wouldn't even, he's also had struggles with mental health and addiction in the past, and said some terrible things to me that, are really hard to get past and even ongoing. So I used to just ignoring a lot of these bad texts that, don't help to get involved with. This though, I felt bad for him because I just went through this terrible year and a bit, and he just seemed so so about the family name. And so like, I thought actually I would have taken it better because I was actually in the process of adopting a child internationally before we surprisingly did conceive our first daughter. But we had fertility issues, me and my husband, for 6 years, and we're in the process of adoption. So really, like, to me, being biological didn't matter. It really didn't. So I was actually surprised how much this did affect me based on that. But I think just that betrayal in itself, and not having that identity, you know, and I have friends that have also have adopted from the same country. We were that I met through the adoption process. And when we had the social worker do the home study and come over, and it was very clear that you tell them as early as possible, read them stories. They're not going to understand it, but you read them those books about the animals taking in a different kind. And so that's what we were planning on doing. We would never have kept that to ourselves, right? Because I know that would have been hard to handle. Not that I had at the time, but it just sounds like it would be. Now it's like, holy cow, that's the identity crisis. And
right. So it wasn't about the biology to you. It was about the secret, not knowing, and that upheaval.
Yeah. I mean, a combination, I guess, to a point, but I don't feel like if I had if my father was biological, we'd be any closer. Right. We weren't super close, but we were close. Like, it was a good relationship. And I did have, like I said, a good upbringing. I had lots of opportunities. And one thing that really, really bothered me, still does to this day, is at one point, my mom called me ungrateful, as if because I'm mad about this, my whole childhood was a sham and I'm ungrateful for the childhood I had. And I think, and the fact too, basically I took it as her thinking she's Mother Teresa, well, you had the better father, obviously, in the end. Sure, I did, but you lied about it. It just, that was hard. And even to this day, she said sorry for it, 8 months later. But even to this day, that still really bothers me, that I'm coming off as ungrateful, because that's not what, I'm not ungrateful. I'm still blessed for what I had, but part of you feels like you lived a lie.
Yeah.
I'm a very sentimental person, and little things like, oh, here's my dance costume from when I was 7 years old, that stuff I would keep. Now I can barely look at that stuff. Funny enough. Yeah. Even though I'm not ungrateful, I did have a lot of opportunities. Not every kid got to do dance class and whatnot, but it's like that sentimental value kind of left with this whole thing.
Yeah. A lot of NPEs and people that have experienced DNA surprises talk about the importance of that medical history. So knowing that your biological father had mental health and substance abuse issues, and then seeing that translate to your brother having them, is that something that you've thought about?
100%. I'm really feel lucky that I didn't dabble in drugs, and because there's a genetic factor for sure. That's become more clear recently with studies, and my counselor mentioned it as well. And so I wish I had known, because what if I was going to, in my high school years, do something? I'm lucky I didn't, but would have been good to know for that reason,
Yeah.
And when I thought about my brother, I wondered if he was just a clone of what my biological father was, right? I didn't know if my biological father was that great of a human being. It's hard. Some people pass away, you hear the best, right? Maybe if I get into it with the half brother, I'll get more, more insight to how he felt growing up. I feel really bad that I wasn't there for him, as he's obviously gone through a lot. Prior, even with having a father that wasn't there that much and into drugs, picking drugs over you. And I really feel bad that I wasn't there for him. And that's probably because I'm 10 years older. He didn't really have anyone, he didn't have any other siblings that could relate to that. But I ended up finding out through the other aunt. She said something when we went for coffee not too long ago. She said something about how she's pretty sure that my grandfather contacted my mother at some point. And at that point, I thought my mother told me everything I need, like all the secrets. I didn't know what was the truth, but I didn't really think there was any other big secrets. I think I thought I got it all. So she didn't really know, though. Like the aunt just thought she heard that but didn't know why, didn't know anything. Of course, I'm assuming it's because he heard about me. Why else would he meet with her? So, but my grandfather passed away, so I can't even, I don't even know. All I could do was ask my mom. And I tried to word it with my mom like, oh, this is what I was told. Tell me what was said so I can see if the stories match. Even though I didn't have a story. I didn't know.
Yeah. And what did she say?
She said that it was just after the half-brother was born and that he contacted her because he knew where she worked. And so they met up for coffee. And it was him trying to convince her to basically get together with his son and raise his child with him. And that she claims I wasn't even mentioned.
What do you think about that?
Well, it seems strange that considering she never met him, I don't know, maybe it was his son just saying, oh, that woman would have been a good mom. And they were basically at that point knew that the biological mother wasn't going to be good for this child. So, yeah, it was kind of upsetting. I'm kind of thinking, I think I said to her, well, you didn't tell him that you might have his grandchild at home, right? Like, she didn't have anything else to say, but she basically told him, apparently she told him that she's not going to leave her husband and she's happy, kind of, we're fine. And that was that. So I don't even know if the biological father knew about my brother. Like, I don't know when they stopped communicating. I did ask prior to finding about the first communion, I did ask if he knew about me. And she said that she did see him once after, like he stopped by her work and he asked like, oh, like she knew she had a baby and said, oh, is she mine? And my mom was like, I don't know, who knows? And he said, okay, well, according to my mom, he said, well, don't come to me for child support. And apparently she gave him a picture of her and I or something. So,
oh, wow.
I mean, I guess nobody knew, nobody had confirmation, right? But everyone knew it was a possibility. Other than my dad, my birth certificate.
And are you getting these little bits of information just over time? You're finding like more little bits as it goes?
Exactly. And the fact that like, I thought my mother learned her lesson to come clean. And then that happens 8 months later. It's like, you forgot that piece of information, like really you forgot you met my biological grandfather, right? Like, so who knows how much there is.
You and your mother are not as close now. Do you have any hope for repairing your relationship?
The hope is mostly for my children because they've always been really close with her and my birth certificate father. It's more at this point for them. And I think that was a big concern for her too when it all happened, is like, I can literally say you're never seeing my children again and me, right? I think that was a big worry for her too. But I don't want to do that to my children. When I thought about, like, when she was saying, don't tell your father about it, it's going to ruin our marriage. My thought was, so then when my kids, like, I'm not going to lie to my kids like you lied to me. So when my kids get old enough or want to do a DNA test, but actually even old enough to ask me about their ethnicity, I'm not going to lie about it to them. But then what? I'm going to say, don't tell your grandpa. So I'm going to tell them to lie, just like you're telling me to, right? So it just felt like I was just becoming her even more if I do that. But I wasn't going to lie to my children. There are certain times where something she says or does really, really just sets me off. So it's hard to totally forgive somebody and move on. And I don't even know if I'll ever be able to get there. I hope so. But I know that trust's never going to come back. For sure. It's never going to. But if I can, just basically what I've been trying to do at this point is just try to be able to be in the same room with her, maybe converse a bit, but it not mean I'm going to leave and be more upset. working on it, still seeing a counselor, but I really felt like by now I should be further on, but I know everyone has their own pace.
So I know you said you're in counseling and you have good days and bad days, but where would you say you are overall in your NPE journey now?
I'm doing pretty good. So I had to be on like antidepressants and anxiety medication for about a year. And it was just really lucky too. Obviously I wasn't working it was basically like I'm back right now, because I work in the event industry. So it's been a long time since I've had employment, like full-time employment. For the counseling, I was able to get there's the crime victim assistance program for immediate families. So I was able to get 36 free hours of counseling, which will last me a long time, which is great. But I really needed that because just already the stress of paying our bills when I'm not getting my income, we're just solely on my husband's, and paying for the kids to still be able to do swim lessons and all that, right? So
yeah.
So I was really lucky because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to see a counselor as often, and I don't think I would be even where I am now. It's just one of those things too, even just talking about it with anybody, with someone that's supportive. I shouldn't say anybody. It just feels better. So, and my husband, he's been my angel when I went through that depression and really wasn't sleeping well and just wanted to lay in bed all day, even though I couldn't sleep. He would handle the kids and work as well and take them, to school and do all that. He really stepped up, and he's always been really good, but he knew I needed it. So that was a blessing in disguise. I'm very grateful for him. So I know it's hard for a lot of people though, because it's very expensive. So I'm very grateful that I got that.
What advice would you offer a parent who is keeping a DNA surprise from their child?
Tell them right away. Although when I do look back, I do think there was times in my life that would have been very hard, certain ages where, especially as a teenager, hormonal girl, that I know that I was at a good place in my life now when I did find out about it. Yeah. But my thought would be earlier, the better for sure. And
sort of like you planned to with the child you were going to adopt. You were going to tell them right away.
Exactly.
What advice would you offer someone who just discovered that they're an NPE?
For sure, get a counselor, keep those people in your circle and, talk to them, the ones you're close to that would be supportive. I think talking about it is the biggest thing for sure, but also having a medical professional check in with you. Because if I didn't have that doctor to say, let's just try some antidepressants, I wouldn't know if I needed them, because when have a shock like that, of course you're not going to be your normal self. But I don't know where does it get to the point of depression or anxiety. I just knew I was going through a lot.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. I hope that your journey continues in a positive direction and that you find peace.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening.